all of you to this signature event of ours. We do call distinguished speakers from all across the country and also abroad to give us some insights into something that's happening in management and also a wider generic views. Before we start off, may I request all of you to kindly put your phones on silent mode. That will help us a lot, please. So, to begin with, thanks a lot to all of you for coming, for making it here. I know other people are also joining us slowly. Before we start, I request Professor R. Natarajan to speak on the topic from bird droppings to Big Bang, the unexpected and unusual source of discoveries and innovation. May I request Dr. Sumantra Bose, the ED and General Secretary of Netaji Research Bureau, to kindly welcome the gathering and tell us something about it.
Sir. Good evening, and thank you for coming. On behalf of Netaji Research Bureau, we are really delighted to collaborate with the CMA and the IIN CAA Kolkata chapter on this event. I would like to extend a particularly warm welcome to Professor R. Natarajan. We are very happy to have you here, someone of your distinction. And I'm also glad that you have had a chance to view the wonderful museum which our father, Dr. Kumar Bose, established here in 1961. Netaji Bose was a man of scientific temperament, and he was a keen advocate of harnessing the forces of technology to India's reconstruction and development once freedom was achieved. It's a tragedy of history that Netaji Bose did not get the opportunity to put his ideas into operation and to bring India as it was, underdeveloped, pauperized, to realize his vision of turning that grim reality into something entirely different. A prosperous India at peace with itself, standing tall, respected in the world, and driven by scientific technology and knowledge. Some of you will be aware that it was Subhash Bose who, as Congress President in 1938, in late 1938, who set up the National Planning Committee of the Indian National Congress, which can be regarded as the precursor and the predecessor to the Post-Independence Planning Commission of India. He made Jawaharlal Nehru the chairman of that committee, and perhaps Professor Natarajan has seen that photograph as well when he toured the museum. There is a photograph displayed in the museum of the inaugural meeting of the National Planning Committee in Bombay, I think, in late 1938. Netaji is delivering a welcome address. Nehru is sitting at his side, diligently taking notes, and around a boardroom-style table, you have gathered a galaxy of the top Indian scientists and experts of that era. So that was his vision. Thank you again for coming. We are delighted to host this event in collaboration with our partners. Mr. G.M. Kapoor is a collaborator of Netaji Research Bureau and a friend of Netaji Bhawan in a substantive sense, not just in a nominal or a token sense. And we often call on his services and his expertise for certain things we need in order to maintain this institution and the museum. So without further ado, I hand the podium back to our compare, of the evening, and we all look forward to Professor Natarajan's very intriguingly titled talk. Jai.
Before we hand it over to Dr. R A Natarajan, may I request GM Kapoor, the President of Calcutta Management Association, also a part of IIM Calcutta Alumni Association, to kindly deliver the inaugural address and also welcome and introduce our speaker faculty.
Thank you, Anirban, and good evening. And at the outset, a very happy New Year to all of you. I must thank Professor Sugata Bose and Professor Sumantra Bose for having permitted us the use of this beautiful auditorium for hosting this event. I had requested them because I felt that Professor Natarajan would be delighted to be here with his sense of history, his sense of management, his sense of sciences, etc. This would be an ideal location for his talk. Anyway, the talk is, as was mentioned, from bird droppings to big bangs, the unexpected and unusual sources of discovery and innovation. Professor Ramchandra Natarajan, known to us as Nats, he is incidentally a batchmate of ours from IIM Calcutta. A lot of his, my and his batchmates are there amongst the audience. He is a PhD, CPIM, CIRM, and he received his BTech from IIT Madras, PGDM from IIM Kolkata, Masters in Managerial Economics and Decision Sciences from Kellogg Graduate School of Management, Northwestern University, and his PhD in Business from the University of Kansas. He was the W.E. Mayberry Professor of Management and the Associate Dean of the College of Business at Tennessee Tech University. He continues to be the W.E. Mayberry, Emeritus W.E. Mayberry Professor. The talk, which is intended for a general audience, will use illustrative examples to show how mistakes, accidents, chance, noise, dreams, and serendipity have inspired eureka moments and given rise to important innovations and discoveries. The speaker will provide some explanation for why such phenomena are not all that uncommon. One accidental discovery has spawned fascinating connection with Kolkata's heritage. The talk will address the discovery and the connections. And at the outset, many thanks to again Professor Sugata Bose and Professor Sumantra Bose for permitting the use of the Netaji Bhawan for this event. We are indeed obliged. Before we start, may I request on behalf of the CMA and the IIM Calcutta Alumni Association. This is on behalf of the IIM Calcutta Alumni Association. Who has remembered? This is also on behalf of the IIM Calcutta Alumni Association. This is a oral history of IIM Calcutta. Same thing for you, sir. That's on behalf of the Calcutta Management Association. Some mementos of the sick. So, over to you, Professor Natarajan. I think.
Good evening to you all, and thank you, GM, and thank you, Professor Bose, and Professor Bose again for giving me this opportunity to be here. This is really a very distinguished honor and a privilege for me to be standing before you right here in the Netaji Research building, and right where Netaji Subhash Bose was born and brought up and spent his early days. So that's really an honor. And GM, you're absolutely right, because I love this setting, with this sense of history and all the other things. Just the ambience itself is so great that you can soak in a lot of things, here in terms of, historical significance and all that. So I'm always delighted to be here in Kolkata, at least at this time of the year, when the weather is very cooperative and very pleasant, and also a lot of things are going on. The cultural activities this year, particularly the BNL, and again, it's a great opportunity for me to connect with my classmates and other friends. So it's really a great time for me, a really exciting time for me to be in Kolkata. And for all that, again, I must thank GM, who has always, been very, very, very active in organizing and sponsoring these kind of events for me. Dr. Sumantra Bose said this topic is a very intriguing one, and it certainly is, because it has intrigued me for a few years. And I've been thinking about these kind of things for a while, because recently, last few years, I've developed this interest in innovation, and I've been studying innovations in various contexts. And this is something I found is quite intriguing. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you some illustrative examples of some unexpected and unusual source of innovation and discoveries. And then, being a theoretician, being an academician, I would like to also see some pattern. Okay? So what is the pattern here? And is it going to happen again? And if so, that's what I'm saying, it's not all that uncommon. But we can come up with some explanations as to why these things occur, and it's likely to occur again in future. So with that background or context, I'd like to get my presentation moving here. So let's, so from thought droppings to Big Bang, the unexpected and the unequal source of discoveries and innovations. So I'm going to start with bird dropping, the very specific type of pigeon droppings to Big Bang. And so what you see here is a giant antenna at Bell Labs, that was set up in the 1960s in Bell Labs in Homedale, New Jersey. And what you see on the right-hand side are photos of two great scientists. Both of them won actually the Nobel Prize. One is Arnold Penzias, Dr. Arnold Penzias, and the other one is Robert Wilson. But let me get to the story in just a moment. Okay, so 1964, the setting is 1964, Bell Labs, Cookeville, New Jersey. 1964, a very interesting year. Some of you may recall, when you're my age or my cohort's age, 1964. At least for me, I was in a very sleepy town, of Nagpur. Very peaceful, great educational experience. I was going through high school. And the big thing that was happening in 1964 in my life was the expected release of a blockbuster movie called Sangam. So much you might remember that. Sangam, the whole city was, anticipating that movie, the release of that movie. And another high point I remember from 1964 was I was in class, 11th standard or something. And we had our teacher, teaching physics and math. And at that time, the Tokyo Olympics are going on. And everybody was glued to the radio. And of course, he could not do that. There was only one radio in the principal's office. And so he would go like every 10 minutes to see what was going on in the finals of the gold medal, match between India and Pakistan, because that is an important match. Because after, from 1928 to 1956, India won the gold medal consecutively, and then in 1960 they lost to Pakistan. So it was like a time to get back, and get the gold. And so after, almost towards the end of the thing, we didn't know what was going on. So he walked back into the classroom, and then he had a dead time face. We didn't know what was going on. So we thought maybe India's lost. And again, sad news kind of thing. But after that, he kind of broke into a smile, and then says India has won, 1-0, and the whole entire class had to, cheer. So those are the high points. 1964 ended. While all this is going on in my life, these two guys, Arnold Penzias and and Robert Wilson. Okay, they were really radio astronomers. And Bell Labs had built this huge antenna, and they were using it for mostly commercial purpose until 1962, when one of them said, okay, no, we need it for research. And then there were different satellite, tracking things that came on, and therefore this was released for research by Bell Labs. And they were looking for some microwave radiation. Their specialty was to, how to, receive and send microwave signals using this antenna as a radio telescope. So that's what they were interested in. And what was happening was, every time they were trying to get the microwave signals going, there was some static. Okay, there was some background static that was there. And they didn't know where it was coming from. Okay? And for a while they thought it was from the pigeon droppings. So they went around for a few days, cleaning up all the antenna and saying, okay, where are the pigeon droppings? Maybe that's the one that's causing the static. And then that was taken care of. And then after that they thought maybe it was directional. Maybe it is coming from, interference is coming from maybe big cities, where there are more traffic, in terms of radio waves and so on. So they pointed it to New York, and still it was there, okay, all the time. And so they still were puzzled, okay, so what's going on? And they really tried to dismiss that as a noise, and but they didn't know how to separate that from the signal, microwave signal that they were interested in. At the same time, just a few kilometers down the road, from Bell Labs, we had another great physicist called Robert Dickey, and he had already figured that out. Okay, and he was interested in the origin of the universe and Big Bang and so on. So he said, if there was a Big Bang, if Big Bang really happened, there would be some residual effect of that we should still be able to detect. And so he said this residual radiation would still be there. And so he had the theory, okay, but he didn't have the observation. These guys had the observation, and they didn't know what it was. Okay, they didn't know what it was. And finally they said, okay, maybe we should go and talk to Robert Dickey. And Robert Dickey said, okay, you guys have beaten me, okay, you guys have spooked me. Basically, this is exactly the kind of thing I was looking for. And when then they realized that this is the so-called cosmic, background radiation, which is there, okay, which is all pervasive, and no matter which direction you go, you're going to have that background radiation, and really points to the origin of the universe, the Big Bang. Okay? So, but it's just totally kind of an accident that these people stumbled into it, and it is also very interesting that right there you had someone who could provide the theory for that, and so what they dismissed as noise really turned out to be something very, very of great significance. Okay, then from there we go to 1957, I believe. And anybody knowing Russian? No Russians. What is that?
Sputnik.
Yes, exactly. Okay, Sputnik 1, right, that was launched in 1957 by the then Soviet Union. And those letters really mean GPS. Okay, those letters stand for GPS. So this is really the story of GPS, but came about in a very unexpected way. That Monday, October 7, 1957. So we are looking at the Applied Physics Lab, Johns Hopkins University, and then you had two physicists who were just not doing anything in particular. Okay, so they were doing their whatever research and all that, but they didn't have some kind of a receiver. They didn't have a receiver in the lab, and all of a sudden, they found some kind of a signal that was periodic, okay? So like every 30 minutes or something, they could get that signal in the receiver. And then they start wondering, okay, what's going on? And they spent the entire day, October 7th, and what's going on, where is this coming from, all that. And finally they figured out that, hey, this is actually coming from the Sputnik. Because the Soviet Union, they said, we don't want people to think it's a hoax. So they did make sure that the Earth received that signal. So this is the first signal, man-made thing coming from space and trying to communicate with the with Earth, with people on Earth. And so they figured that out and they worked on it. And soon they were able to figure out where that particular Sputnik was. And they used what you call the Doppler effect. So they realized that when it is approaching their location, then the frequency changes, right? And then when it goes away, frequency is different. So that's the Doppler effect. So through that, they were able to infer the exact position of the Sputnik. And then with more work, they are able to actually even figure out the orbit of Sputnik, which is amazing. But this is totally, their own curiosity. They were not doing anything in particular or looking for that. And soon, everybody in the lab got interested, and it also got the attention of their boss, whose name was Frank T. McClure. And so he had his own interest. So he looked at all this and said, "Hey, you guys have been able to, determine the orbit of that Sputnik. So I'm going to pose a reverse problem. Okay? But suppose you're in space. Can you locate something on Earth? Actually, in particular, he wanted to know, can they locate something in water? And water, and the object is also moving. And now you would have guessed what it is. It's a US submarine. US submarine, they wanted to know whether somebody from in the satellite can figure out the movements of the US Navy submarine. And so they said, okay, they looked at the problem and said, yes, we can. And they figured out, okay, they all, whatever we know about GPS, triangulation, all those things. So they were able to find out, they came up with some, what they call the algorithms and such, to basically say, okay, we can track, from space, we should be able to track the movement on Earth, the geographical location, on land as well as in water. And so all this, just within, from 1957 to 1958, at Raytheon Corporation, an engineer called Iman Getting and his team, who were able to put together GPS, which later on was commercialized and so on, with all the other refinements. But basically, that was the foundation, of GPS, and totally unexpected. I mean, that it's not something that they were looking for, but thank God, we have it, otherwise we'll all be lost in traffic today, okay? We won't be able to, all the things navigation we are getting through smartphones is all based on GPS, of course. Okay, then one more, moving on to the X-Man, okay? To the X-Man, that is Röntgen, and basically the discoverer of X-ray. Now, Röntgen was a very interesting character. If you look at his biography, Röntgen actually did not even have a high school diploma. Didn't get his high school diploma. And his mother was from Netherlands, so he went and studied in Netherlands, okay, when he was young. And that's where his schooling was. And there, he had a friend of his, classmate of his, who actually was very mischievous. So he drew a caricature of the instructor. And so the instructor obviously got mad, but he thought it was done by Röntgen. So Röntgen was, but he didn't want to give up his friend. He didn't want to say that it's done by a friend. He didn't do that, so he took the blame. And for that he was expelled from school, and he really never got his diploma. So that kind of thing, it says something about the man. Later on what he would be, kind of thing, because he was quite a man of high integrity. And then he wandered around, went to Germany, and then went to Switzerland and so on. But somehow they were able to give him what he called the habilitation status, which is like a graduation in Switzerland, despite the fact that he didn't have high school diploma. And because of his brilliance, because of his what he was able to do in physics. So around 1895, he was kind of experimenting. He's a great experimenter. He's doing all kind of things with cathode rays. The cathode ray tube was well known at that time. It was a big source equipment for which a lot of physicists were using to study cathode to different phenomena. You basically have a charge going from the anode to the cathode, that sort of thing. And so he was trying with different medium, in the cathode ray tube, and then different voltages and so on. And all of a sudden, he noticed a glow. He noticed a glow at a distance, not near that equipment, but at a distance. And he didn't know what it was. So he tried all kind of things. He tried to block it. He put a sheet around the cathode tube, and still it was still there. That glow was still there. And then he put other obstacles in between, but still, the glow was still there. So he realized that something, very interesting is going on. And then probably, these kind of things can never happen today. In terms of a human subject, he asked his wife. And his wife was exposed to about 10 to 15 minutes of X-ray radiation. And what you see there is her hand. Okay, that's her hand. And that is one of the very first X-rays of the world. Okay, and you can see her wedding ring. Okay? You can see the wedding ring, in her hand. And so that's basically where, is how X-rays came about. And it had application immediately. A lot of people realize the power of this thing. It can go beyond, bones, not only bones, but other objects as well. But the first applications are not in medicine, but they were in industry, the industrial applications. But the doctors, they immediately realized after a few years that this is a great tool to understand what's going on inside human bodies and so forth. So again, completely, totally unexpected, but a very happy kind of outcome there. Okay, then this is very, very fascinating. And some of you might have learned about this in your, in our high school chemistry class, about this famous dream that this German chemist had, August Kekulé, and then 1865, he had this dream, and this dream was about a serpent, okay, from the Greek mythology, and the serpent was called Ouroboros, the Ouroboros serpent, and the symbolism there was it was trying to swallow its own tail. And so he had that dream about that, and he has been mulling over this structure for benzene, okay, and other compounds, other organic compounds, and he didn't have any for a long time, okay, for about more than 10 years or so, but he just couldn't figure out what is the satisfactory structure for benzene until he had the dream. He had this dream, and then something suddenly clicked. Okay, and said, okay, why don't we look at the benzene structure like what you see here in the middle? And it's all, I think it's carbon atoms, it's double bond, single bond, and then the hydrogen, atoms are attached to that. And that basically became a very, very important discovery, so to speak, because after that people could think of other chains and other kinds of, carbon connections, and great contributions made contributions in organic chemistry. So that was Kekulé. Okay, but that was not the only, he was not the only one who had this experience. Otto Loewi, another German scientist, and he was trying to answer this question. Is the nerve connection, the communication between nerves or neural connection, how is it happening? Is it a chemical phenomenon or is it an electrical phenomenon? So that's what he was trying to answer. And he has been, again, like Kekulé was mulling over this for several years. And then one day, okay, he had, just before Easter Sunday, so I think 1927 or something, he had this, and then this is his own thing here, observation here, but he has noted down. So the night before Easter Sunday of that year, I awoke, turned on the light, and then jotted down a few notes. And then I fell asleep again. And it occurred to me in the morning that I had written down something very important. But I still could not figure out, it was kind of a sleepy state, could not figure out what it was and what is going on. But he knew it was something important, whatever he had scrawled. And very interestingly, next night, okay, again I had a dream. Again, I had a dream, and around 3 o'clock, he said, the idea returned to him, okay, about it was a design of experiment to determine the transmission mechanism, whether it is between neurons, whether it is chemical or electrical. And then it was and then it kind of tested hypothesis. So what he did was immediately, and that is 17 years ago. He had developed that hypothesis 17 years ago, and finally he figured out how to actually experimentally, verify or confirm the hypothesis. So he immediately went to the lab, and then worked on hearts of frogs. Okay, I don't know if I want to get into that. It's again a very fascinating story. That he had 2 frogs, okay, live frog, their hearts are beating, and then in one he stimulated with electrical signal, and then whatever liquid that was around that heart, he transferred that to the heart of the beating heart of the other frog, and then even without any stimulation, the other heart started to slow down. The heart started to slow down. He had really discovered how to accelerate and slow down the heartbeats. And all that came because of this inspiration from his living. Very fascinating thing in neuroscience, so to speak. Okay, the other dreamers, okay, he's not the only one. The other famous dreamers, okay. Mendeleev, is the father of the periodic table. And apparently the idea for organizing the periodic table according to the atomic weights came again in a dream. Of course, now periodic table is organized according to atomic numbers, but that was the origin, the development, and that he credits to the thing he got in dreams. And then John Eccles, again another neuroscientist, got a Nobel Prize. He was also trying to figure out the cascading effect of neurons, and he also got the inspiration from a dream.
Yeah.
So it's very fascinating that this is not how that, it's not an exception what happened to technique. So other people have had similar experience, and I was reading somewhere that even Ramanujan had some, dream inspiration from dreams regarding some, mathematical ideas like partition and so on. But again, unfortunately, the way things happen in India, it's not well documented. Okay? It's not well documented. There's all kind of anecdotes and things people talk about, nothing to really go by, but I want to first talk. So all these, what is happening in the dreams or the things that these people have experienced, autobiography and Ecody and Mendeleev, all that is being explained now by 2 neuroscientists. More other neuroscientists are also involved, but these 2 conducted some very interesting experiments. For example, Ulrich Wagner, he came up with the idea of, that when you actually sleep over something, right? In that sleep, your neurons are able to collide and come up with some new combinations, new ideas. So he tested that on problem solving. So he gave a problem which involved combination of numbers. But there was a pattern, there was a rule, which he knew, and he wanted the participants, to whom this problem was posed, to figure out that rule. And he found that people who, and then he told them that, go and sleep and get some sleep, come back and we'll do this again. And people who had that sleep were able to have greater ability to crack his code and figure out the rule. And that was one. And Robert Thatcher had an even more fascinating thing. What he did was he was looking at the synchronous firing of neurons. That quite often, again, it happens at regular intervals. Okay, it's a regular interval, we're talking about milliseconds, where these neurons are all in sync. It's called phase lock. So they're in a phase lock mode, and then they're all, firing at the same time. And apparently, the theory is that mode is very important because that helps you with doing all the routine tasks. But then between this phase lock mode, your neurons are in what you call a very chaotic mode. So there is no distinct synchronization, and they are colliding and so on in a very rapid fashion. And that, he said, is where the creativity is. And that is what these people have experienced. Then that is what is really what. And then he did a thing on children that if you and then they looked at the interval of the chaotic mode, and then there's obviously variation. And then he correlated that with IQs of those children. So the ones who had more, longer chaotic mode, instead of 55 milliseconds, maybe it was like 60 or above. Right? So they had a higher IQ, and every millisecond in that chaotic mode actually showed a higher IQ. It's all again causation, not correlation rather than causation, but he's probably onto something. That this chaotic mode is what is the source for creativity, and not that pattern, the routine thing, where it's all in phase law. And these are some very fascinating findings, in neuroscience, which is throwing more and more light on all these brains and so on. Okay? So memorable. So let's talk about some mistakes. Memorable and meaningful mistakes. And mistakes are the process of discovery, according to James Joyce. And then, of course, some memorable mistakes here. And this is a guy called Wilson, great batch. Jim, how am I doing your time? Is that okay? Because sometimes I tend to get into some of these stories because they're so fascinating. They're so interesting that you can go get into it and lose a sense of time. Anyway, so he was working in New York, near Cornell University, and he basically put together the first working pacemaker. And anybody here wearing a pacemaker, or people know someone who was a pacemaker? Probably no, right? And they should all thank this guy. Because he came up with the first implantable pacemaker. And so Great Batch was working on an oscillator. He was trying to help people who needed his help, because he was an engineer and he was teaching engineering in a local college or university there. And some people approached him because they wanted to build some instruments, and they were, I think, from their psychology. They wanted to figure out how they can measure the vital signs, blood pressure, all those things in animals. And so he was trying to set up an oscillator for that. And then he tried to experiment and coming up. So the oscillator was, recording all kinds of hard rhythms. It was not producing any beats or signals, but it was actually recording. It was more of a recording device, and that's how it was. And then he tried to reach into a box of parts for a resistor to complete circuitry, and he ended up actually, he pulled the wrong resistor, and that turned out to be, that immediately that oscillator started emitting some, this thing which mimicked the heartbeats, and like the human heart. And so this insight is great, but it is not something that happened just like that, because he had this idea that electrical signals can be regulated, through all the electronic devices to actually study the human heart. So he had that expertise earlier. And so it was kind of incubating in his mind. So when he saw this, he immediately realized that, hey, he immediately made the connection that this can be used to help with the human heart in case the human heart is not beating properly or maintaining its rhythm. So this is what he said. The oscillator required a 10 kilo ohm resistor at the transistor base. I reached into my resistor box, but I misread the color coding and got mega whatever it is. Okay, but I raised the mistake, and he did explain. So just a mistake, but he was able to recognize the importance of that mistake, and within a few years, the commercial version, Great Batch and Charter developed the first implantable pacemaker which they put in a dog to see how it is working. Again, very fascinating example of a mistake leading to something very, very significant and important. And this is very interesting that we are talking about all these fundamental things in science, and then technology, pacemaker, all that. Now let's talk about something very, very mundane. Very, very mundane example here, which is also something that we use every day, but is also really a product of experience. And this is a tea bag, okay? This is a very lowly tea bag that all of us use. But how did it come about? Because why is it that people are using tea bags and of course the tea releases is never in metal bags. But how did this come about? Okay. But it is actually due to a mistake that a trader, a tea trader in the US, American tea trader, called Thomas Sullivan. So he was packing the tea, like the tea leaves, in a silk pouch, and then shipping them. Okay, back to the receiving end, people didn't use the tea leaves as such, but then they just started using the tea bag with the silk pouch, and that's basically the origin of so they were really not having they didn't know what it was, but it looked like a interesting thing to do. And so that was, and then later on, people figured out that tea leaves can be mixed with all the other things, so he kind of sealed them, right? And then later on, the material of the bag was changed, and people, I think some Germans got into that. German company in Düsseldorf or somewhere, and then more mistakes were made. For example, once in World War I, they had completely sealed it, and then the thing was like a gauze, so it will never release the flavor. And so when it was given to the troops are basically drinking hot water, no tea, okay, no flavor of tea. So all those mistakes were made, and then some interesting thing I want to share with you is that they also had, especially in Germany, where all these things happen, there are some pubs, and I believe there is one pub where they had this contest of throwing the tea bag vertically and see if it sticks. And apparently there is still such a tea that are sticking there in the ceiling, which were tossed maybe in the 1950s or 1960s. Anyway, so that's about the tea bag, how a mistake, series of mistakes has led to that. And this is another fascinating example, but again, not a very high-tech example. Oyster, and in particular, we're talking about oyster sauce. Okay, so this guy was a young cook in the coastal province in southern China in 1888. He was preparing the oyster soup, and forgot that to turn off the heat or something on the stove. And suddenly, it was simmering and became very thicker and thicker, and then became a gravy. It was speaking gravy. And then I said, okay, maybe you can still salvage it and see how it tastes. Okay? Started tasting that thick gravy, and he actually liked it. He said, maybe this we can market. Maybe people like it. And that's where all this developed this into this so-called oyster sauce. And that lucky mistake would make him very rich, and then his descendant has benefited from that. And now his great grandchildren are worth $17 million because of the mistake that his great grandfather made. But it turned out to be very, very lucky for them. Right? So that's one, and then let's move on to some other things. Okay. This guy is a big guy. If you recognize with these guys, you see, I'm sure you all heard about him and his stories and that about him and his contribution and all.
Isaac Newton.
Who is it?
Newton, no. Isaac Newton.
No, not Isaac Newton. This is Joseph Priestley, who kind of isolated oxygen and gave all of us oxygen in a way, in a figurative sense. So, and what you see here is a statue of Priestley in leaves, focusing sunlight on quick oxide. In fact, that is how it is called oxide, by releasing oxygen from mercury oxide by heating it and exposing it to sunlight. That was the original and great contribution. But then we also got something more interesting, which interests all of us, perhaps, or at least some of us, is that he's a very curious man. He's a man of all kinds of things, okay, very wide interest, and he was a free thinker, and he supported the French Revolution. There were a lot of people in England who didn't like him, and then they even bought down his home for that. But he got support. He went to the US, lived in Pennsylvania, became friends with Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, so on and so forth. But in 1767, he fought himself in Leeds, in a brewery. And being a very curious guy, always tinkering, always making experiment, and especially with gases and such. So he saw the beer growing and all the effervescence, all the vapors coming out of the vats. And he said, okay, what's going on? Okay, what's in these vapors? So he wanted to capture that. And one easy way to capture all these things is by dissolving it in water. So he put a bowl of water, and then all these things were rising, and then they were getting dissolved. And he didn't stop there, he just stopped there, but he said, okay, let's see how it tastes, think how it tastes. And then he tasted it, and he liked it, it was great. And basically what he did, what he found, was really carbonated water, okay? And what we call today soda. Okay? So all the carbonation, drinks and all that. Okay, there's another guy who also had developed carbonated water, but Prestige became more famous, and then he didn't benefit from it commercially, but you might recall there's a guy, or you might know a guy, a famous brand called Schweppes. Okay, so that guy took this idea and then commercialized it on larger scale, and then he became very rich. And of course he got all the honors and the glory and all that. So basically, whenever you are having a glass of soda and mixing that with whiskey and all that, you have to thank this guy. And he's the one who came up with a very interesting idea of carbonated water with this soda soft drinks, right? Basically the foundation of soft drinks industry today. This is another, and if you're talking about whiskey and soda, you have to talk about gin and tonic. So this is the next one. Example. And remember, I'm talking about, so I've titled it as the story of tonic and gin, not gin and tonic. Okay, not gin and tonic. So I'm calling what the doctor prescribed, the physicians prescribe to what the doctor orders in a bar. Yes. So that's the kind of connotation here. So what you see here, and I'm going to be clear from the slide, is really the whole idea. The thing is tonic. Tonic is really what you call quinine water. And quinine was discovered accidentally in South Africa, in Peru, when there was a traveler, traveling somewhere in Peru, and then he fell sick, and then the native Indians, they took the bark of a tree, and then they created some kind of a concoction, and then they gave it to him. And then, he was cured after a few days. So basically, that was the so-called cinchona tree, and what he was getting was quinine. And so it's all in Peru. And you can see here there was some Spanish Jesuit missionary, and he's saying that in the diocese of Quito, that is in Ecuador, grows a certain kind of large tree which has a bark like cinnamon, a little more coarse and very bitter, with ground powder given to those who are fever, and with only this remedy it makes them cured. Okay, so that's basically the thing. And you can see the Spanish king receiving this like a gift from the Peruvian Indian chief, and that is this kind of a painting that is in one of the museums in Rome. And that's basically the birth of quinine. And now here comes the story of tonic and gin and the connection with Kolkata. Because tonic is basically quinine, but quinine is very, very bitter. It's a very bitter thing, and that's why sometimes they call it the bitter medicine. But it was given to a lot of people, especially troops. And to make it more palatable, to make the tonic more palatable, they either added sugar or they added gin. The gin is really like a fruit extract, it's called Genever from Dutch. And so they started adding that to tonic to make it more palatable. So really it was not gin that came first, but tonic came first. And then gin was being added. It was being given to all the troops, so that to prevent them from getting malaria and so on. But the interesting thing is, this tonic and gin has played a very important role in the colonial history, particularly of that of Bengal. Yes? For example, there was this thing about mosquito, the campaign against mosquito, because it was found that mosquitoes are causing malaria, right? And therefore, you have to destroy or have the war campaign against the thing. And so it all even had literature. A lot of people were writing literature. And Calcutta was a key center for plant distribution. And the British Army, they're not only from a medicinal point of view, they were also encouraging their troops to kind of start consuming alcohol, particularly gin and tonic, with some added lemon. Even today, when you have gin and tonic, there always a pinch of lemon, right? Because it prevents scurvy, which is a very prevalent disease at that time, lack of vitamin C. So that's how all this came about. And what you find is, okay, so I think maybe I should proceed the next one. Okay, so malaria and quinine in the 19th century British India were locked in symbiotic bonds of co-determination. And probably Dr. Sumantra Bose might have met this gentleman. He's a historian at Cambridge. Name is Bhawan. He's a very fascinating historian because he writes the history of insects and animals, and how they have been affected by the politics, and how they've been affected through the ages, and how they in turn have also influenced politics and social life and so on. And of course, we talk about malaria and mosquitoes. Mosquito is the greatest killer the world has ever known. Mosquitoes kill more people than anything else. Okay, so more than all the weapons, all the weapons of mass destruction. So, at this point, let me stop and ask you a quick question here. Who was the first Indian to win the Nobel Prize?
Ronald Ross.
Exactly. Perfect. Okay. No. You all got it. Okay. Ronald Ross. Okay. Ronald Ross was first. Okay. I thought being favorites of Tagore and all, I thought you had said Tagore.
And he discovered it about 1 kilometer from
Exactly. Very gross. Okay. And that is actually stable. Okay? So and that's where all these things come together. Quinine, malaria, Ronald Ross contributions, so on and so forth. Actually, I wanted to say, okay, to be Indian was winning the Nobel Prize. Basically, you need to know that whether he was born in India. Yes, he was. He was born in Mora and UP, then UP. And then he did all his work in India, particularly in Kolkata. And so, as the gentleman pointed out, so that's all that is very fascinating. And one other thing, gin and tonic became the metaphor for colonial British India in the 19th century. Here is a famous quote from Winston Churchill. So, gin and tonic has saved more Englishmen's lives and minds than other doctors in their planet. And of course, one would expect Churchill to say that because he was a very great consumer of alcohol in all forms of himself. So he did appreciate the value of gin and tonic and what it was doing to saving Englishmen's lives and so on. So now let's start out of Ross, okay? 1859 for the Iron stands for Indian Medical Service. Indian Medical Service. So the connection is, he said, okay, I found on the study that showed mosquitoes cause malaria, the Anopheles mosquito, and then of course quinine is the cure for that, and all this is all wrapped up, with what is going on. It spawned all kind of literature about quinine and mosquito in Bengal. So that's the connection. And of course, what you see here, one photo is where he's standing in front of a lab, I think early 1900s. And then the other one is the SSKM hospital, where he's being ordered in the last show there. And is there anything else you want to share about Bhawan Ross? Maybe?
Oh, there's a very interesting book called The Calcutta Chromosome. Whole history of Ronald Ross.
Yeah.
Of course, then it fictionalizes
Right.
There's a same person who taught me went to.
What?
The other day. It's this person who taught me went to the museum. He has this book.
Okay. Yeah.
He did a lot of work in Hyderabad also.
Yes. Hyderabad. Yes. Hyderabad. But he was really because the Indian medical service was sending him to all those places, and he was really unhappy that they were sending him to places there's no mistake. The one which he went on,
The discovery was accidental.
But
The discovery was accidental.
yes, exactly, right.
Very accidentally discovered.
Yes, yeah, that is the point. Again, that is why I include this. I'm sorry I didn't mention that point. Yes, this was also serendipity and unexpected. Okay, I've given some illustrative examples, but that's not exhaustive. I give a catalog of things here. Conflicts, you name it. I mean, all these you can go and look up. All of them have some accident or some unexpected thing that led to the development, and then all this. And of course, the most famous or the one that most people remember is post-it notes. Okay, that again came about. This guy was asked to come up with the adhesive, it's very strong. Instead, all the experiments he did produce something that is not strong, which can easily be peeled off, but nobody really didn't know what to do with it. And then his friend was looking for something that he could put on the songs, singing in the church, and then he didn't want to miss where the thing was known was, so he wanted to put something there, so he borrowed that from this guy. Both were working for 3 years, and so he said, this is a solution to a problem, but later on, it became a big, they found all kinds of applications for post-it notes, and I can go on. Okay, so all these, the penicillin, as an example, came about with an accident or arthrosis. Okay, so let me go to what does it all mean? Because this should not be viewed as isolated examples. So what I tried to do was to come up with some explanation of why these things happen, especially in discoveries and innovation. One of the things is that we have to keep in mind is chance favors the prepared mind. So all these are prepared minds. And in fact, they are preparing their minds over years. Whether it is Kekuli or whether it was Louis or whether it was the other person, great minds. Because they all that had that fermentation going on in their mind, and suddenly then some random things started to click, whether it's a dream or whether something else, and then they were able to make the connection. So chance favors also the connected mind. So what we are talking about here is, it is not just luck or chance, a dumb luck, okay? It's not like winning the lottery. So this is what we call smart luck. And to be lucky in a smart way, you have to have to be smart, you have to have the preparation. You have to the ground should already be fertile, so that the ideas can grow and turn into something more significant. Okay, that's it. And then ideas have been incubated for years. That's basically the same point. And then great bandwidth of the discoverers is very important. So all these guys, they are really had very great bandwidth in the sense that they were very interdisciplinary. So they were not just narrow, focused only on one thing. So they could go beyond that peripheral thing, and then you'll be able to immediately see the connection or application in different things. For example, Great Bose. He was an electrical engineer, but he saw the connection with the human heart. And because of their bandwidth or being able to have very deep knowledgeable or experts in more than one field, and then turning noise into cigarette. So basically they said, okay, instead of dismissing all of this as exceptions, outliers, right? Is there something? Is there any insight that we can get? That was their approach to all these breakthroughs. And then errors. So errors can create a path of innovation. So errors are welcome. We shouldn't just dismiss them and say, okay, that's a mistake, we should, there's nothing in it, saying these results, but instead you should try to spend at least some time trying to understand what's going on. And so when you say errors or a chance, the mistakes that some of the great discoverers made seems to be of a higher order. Okay? So what will land with chance cannot be chance was better instructed, or they've got a much greater level of expertise in that, in that domain. And another interesting quote, same thinking, same idea. Errors of the great mind exceed in number those who will experience one. So it's the great minds actually make more mistakes, more errors, but they're also able to capitalize on those errors, which the ordinary mortals are unable. And so dead ends would be a good thing. Okay, it's not that you have to say, okay, you get frustrated and say, okay, that's the end of it. For example, Einstein used to say that, all it did every day was just think, okay, think about all kind of solutions, things like that. And at the end of the day, he found nothing. He's always, but he didn't give up, okay? Not do that. And he said, that's the nature of the game. You're going to keep doing that. And at some point, some very fruitful connection may be there. Same very same. You have so many failures. And he said, every time there's a failure, what I do is, I know that there's one particular way it's not going to work. So he had this kind of an optimist. He said, okay, I've learned something. And I think that also has a lot of implications for managers, since he had sponsored the CMA. So I think it's better to also not dismiss these things as exceptions. For example, in companies, so if something doesn't work, you don't pay attention to it, but maybe you need a systematic way of thinking about why it's not working. Many companies do what is called loss of customer analysis, right? If you lose a customer, you want to know why, right? And then you want to pursue that. That kind of thing should be there with all innovations. And people should, and then just, and quite often, some idea that did not work, maybe it didn't work because of lack of resources, maybe it didn't work because the market was not ready, maybe there was no acceptance, or maybe some other complementary things didn't happen. For example, we can't have all this, Uber and Ola without smartphone. Okay? Smartphone and internet, that's not going to work. So there are some other complementary things that should happen. So I think if companies and businesses can pay more systematic attention to all these errors and mistakes, they may be, they may be a benefit. And not just, otherwise there is also a tendency in companies to go for something new. New is always better than old, even though the old may have some very interesting ideas, but people say, okay, we want to explore something new, they want more money, budgets and so on, without learning from, what has happened in the past. So some kind of organization history and transfer of knowledge, captures the obligation of what you call, intellectual capital should be there, and you need to have some systematic mechanisms for doing that. Okay, and the other thing is, all these people like Priestley, they were basically experimenters, and they were interested in technology, they were interested in making things work, and they were not great theorists. So sometimes, steam engine, people who developed the steam engine like James Watt, they were not experts in thermodynamics, but they tinkered and figured out something. And so a lot of these things, you don't have to wait for theory. And sometimes theory can be very inhibiting. You say, okay, theory says this, okay, we should try that. It can be inhibiting. So these people were not constrained by that mindset, especially and James Watt. Same with Faraday. Faraday didn't know all the equations of Maxwell, but it was great. All the electric motor, all the other things you hear were all applications, but he didn't know that. But his contribution is as much as what others did. So the whole idea here is, can we make mistakes meaningful? Can we get some insights from mistakes? That's the point I'm trying to make here. And and neuroscience, they're saying, sleep on it, okay? So you may get some fresh ideas on a problem, okay? You should make your sleep, and also creative chaos. All these neurons firing randomly, probably will create some new connections, and you can take advantage of that. So there's all kind of fascinating work going on in neuroscience, which is like sleep and dreams. And so if anybody fell asleep during my talk, okay, this is very interesting. He's a psychologist in Gunpowder, and he studied a lot of microbiology studies, in vivo studies. And he found that more than 50% of the time in the studies, the experimenters, or what they began with, and what they ended up with, was totally different. Totally different. So results were unexpected, but quite often probably also very useful. But provided they were not just ignored or dismissed. So basically, what I have to last what year is expect the unexpected. For the unexpected. And these days I always end with this caveat, okay, in case you're thinking that this whole presentation was created by ChatGPT. Okay, so all this random nonsense was created by myself. So don't be afraid to ChatGPT. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Will you take some?
Sure, sir.
Are there any questions?
I have a comment. Answer the question. So all the examples you give are pre-industrial.
What?
Pre-industrial.
Yes, exactly.
And your conclusion when you come to you're talking of corporations and
Yes, I want to get even for basic mathematics.
there's no correct between the two at all.
Okay.
But one and second, today's research and R&D
Yes.
is a corporate affair. And that begins in the beginning of 20th century. You know, the rise of chemical industry.
Yes.
The science, technology.
Right.
So if Tesla is doing something,
Right.
they have patent, they do research, and they keep buying they keep track of other competitors. It's very different from this somebody dreamer or somebody like that. It's a directed research with a thing. And this transformation is very happened during our time, in a sense. It happened in the rise of modern mass production, chemical industry, like in the first with and then we went onwards. So this is somebody dreaming. Those are just old stories, like no element today. I'm sorry to say that. I would want to be interested in how do you manage research in R&D labs, which is a part of management. That how do you choose where to put your money and where to withdraw your funds? Sorry.
Yeah, okay, so my responding to that is that we said industrial, and there's also PTL. So people were expert on the more on hypothesis without any theory, where already modern R&D is backed by theory, right? So that's one. But many of the examples that are given are also in the 1950s and the 1960s. So it is not that it's totally developed, but I was trying to provide something else. And R&D, the innovation, I think that's one of the
Today's space also in corporation curriculum. See, in the 60s, space research was new. I understand that. And then this bus guy sent people up in this town. What? So so this is a transformation which we have to explain. And this, without this, we cannot understand innovation. I'm sorry to say this. That is how the companies have come to capture the process of knowledge generation and research is the key to the race between countries, race between companies and so on.
Yeah.
And that is missing from your example in this direction to go back to another era where there were individual innovators or scientists discovering something. That era is over. Today universities do it in the directed manner.
Or not again, things like, for example, Apple's iPhone.
It was directed research.
What were the criteria?
They spent years trying to have a food. They were late into the game. They worked hard. Listen, there's no this kind of, that is just the example I would give. A directed research where they said we'll get into this market and they realize the future better product. And then they hired the patent, they still use the patent to harness Samsung and others. So it's like a monopoly. And monopoly is creating R&D. This is a dynamic, given Nobel and all that, America by design. No, we're going to stop on this. Corporations and research and innovation will be required.
Yeah, but there have been some very big product failures where you use them.
R&D failures also.
And here, what I got from his lecture was that there were instances where a lot of, say, by chance, developments,
accidental.
by accident, they proved something.
Like something, it's
A product which came into being.
Right.
He is not trying to propagate that as a theory.
No.
He is just talking about the serendipity.
I went with the
You are talking about a totally different aspect. He is talking about serendipity, how things will happen. That is what is the whole talk about. Yeah, you are taking it.
Just the takeaways don't come from that side. That's what I say. Your takeaways do favor.
Sir, just one concept is running in your mind. The main objective of this particular speech was based on we should encourage happening, that there will be situation where the accident happens, and you can the organism comes to get productive out of that happening. Okay, that is the objective. But in one way, the corporates are happy for zero defect. They are trying to ensure Six Sigma quality.
Yes.
So they, in one way, the corporate is discouraging that you should not fail. And to create this kind of happening, we should encourage that the employee should fail also. So there is some kind of discouraging difficulty here. Thank you, sir.
Let me add to you.
Yeah, just over.
Bolo, जोर से बोल.
See, there is a great takeaway from what you have given. I can tell you modern organizations today, and I have worked in a very large one for a very long period of time. Research organizations today, in the modern context, those which are successful, give about 25 to 30% free and flexible time to their researchers to do the dreaming, to do things which are not really connected with the laid out objectives, so that they can come up with something. One shining example of that is 3M, from where a lot of innovations have come. So modern research organizations they take cognizance of what you have spoken,
Right.
and they build this into their structure. So this is something very relevant. I don't think it's modern organizations don't act.
Certainly.
Instead,
On the exams, like some creative things are given here. For example, post-it notes. Post-it notes take a lot because 3M was encouraging what is called entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship. And they let these people, like 20% of the time, like, is theirs. And then they can experiment, they can play with all these ideas. And if there is a business case to be made, then they take it before the board. And that's exactly what happened with post-it notes. And I'm saying, one takeaway from all this is, can you prepare, can you create a fertile ground in which the innovations or ideas can germinate, so to speak. But all these, all these are actually products of modern R&D and working in labs and all that. So let's, make everybody always happens here.
There you have one last question.
The accidents working with all these.
No, not a question.
All these are.
Not a question.
So that is the question.
Well, Professor Natarajan, thank you very much for a wonderfully illuminating presentation. It was a revelation, indeed a revelation. Now, my question is to you is, what you mentioned as answers coming from dreams is, is not exactly an accident. If you go deeper, as we have three states, conscious, subconscious and unconscious. The answers to the problems are there in the subconscious and in the unconscious. The more and more we go deeper and delve into the subconscious and the unconscious, these answers come. Like the discovery of the formula of benzene came in a dream. So that's my question to you, Professor Natarajan, that since you have delved into a very interesting topic, which has not yet been fully explored, do you believe that the answers lie in our subconscious and our unconscious, and we have to go delve deeper and deeper, dig deeper and deeper into the subconscious and unconscious to get the solutions, the answers to this to the problems that face us.
I won't say
existence.
I won't say that the answer is right there in the subconscious to be found or discovered, but it is possible through this combination of things that happens in our fully awake state or in sleep and such. It can trigger some solutions, but it's not that it's there out there and we are trying to get that out. That's my opinion.
Last project, Professor Natarajan is a wonderful thing, but I like to add up one thing, like you see many of the technology comes before science. That's a difficult choice for me. Which comes early.
That's a difficult one. This is the first point. Second point is when you talk about innovation, of course, there is experimentation, destroy, and a lot of questions are there. But that has become a part of the academic curriculum. Like someone is saying regarding the research, 20% was there. And even in India, most of the engineering and the university, the government of India set up the innovation cells. I think the money is sparked in. And the students, they try to think, and they are vested. But sometimes something comes out, and again, they go for this, the experimentation, and ultimately it comes to as a commercial thing.
I think some of the things.
The entrepreneurship is coming up.
Yeah, but there is a big gap between ideation, getting an idea, and actually making it acceptable in the marketplace. And there are so many steps involved. And these innovation cells are great, but I'm not sure they will facilitate all the commercialization. But what I'm trying to, from what you're saying, that all that experimentation is really technology building. And they may or may not be aware of the theory underlying theory. And sometimes that ignorance may actually help them. That, try something new, which they would not have if they were completely immersed in theory. That's the point I'm trying to make. A lot of technology has been developed before a formal systematic theory was developed to explain that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I request Professor Sugata Bose to kindly give his closing remarks.
One more question, but I have to off stage.
Friends, I think you will all join me in thanking and congratulating Professor Natarajan for giving us such an instructive and entertaining lecture. Historians have for long had arguments about whether history is shaped by impersonal structural forces or whether there can in fact have been accidents or unexpected developments which have dramatically changed the course of history. That large argument will probably remain unresolved for a very long time. But I think in this evening's lecture, by giving us examples from the history of science and medicine, Professor Natarajan has at least for now clinched the argument in favor of those who have made a case for chance. And the examples were absolutely fascinating. And I also thought that it was very interesting that Professor Natarajan chose to rewind history. He began with an episode from 1965 and then took us back to 1957 and then to the late 19th century, then the discovery of quinine far away in Ecuador, which then came back to late 19th century and early 20th century Calcutta to help us address the scourge of malaria. Of all the examples you gave, perhaps the most pertinent at this institution was the 1890s discovery of the X-ray. The founder of this institution, Dr. Shishi Kumar Bose, our father, was the pioneering pediatric radiologist of this country. He was one of the pioneering pediatricians, but he was certainly the first specialist pediatric radiologist. When I was a child, at the age of 2, I went with my parents to Boston, where my father had a Rockefeller Fellowship at the Harvard Medical School, and there he worked with a wizard in the field of pediatric radiology named Dr. Ed Neuhauser. And he came back with that training from Boston Children's. And some of you should see our exhibition of paintings that will be going on of portraits until the 26th of January. And one of the portraits is that of my father, done by a well-known American artist, Frank C. Bensing, who had come to Boston from New York to do a large oil painting of Edna Newhouser and his residents and his students. And that painting still hangs in the Boston Children's Hospital's walls. But he also did a portrait of Dr. Shishir Kumar Bose, which was given as a farewell gift to our mother, Krishna Bose, in a large X-ray envelope. So I found your radiology example from the 1890s absolutely fascinating. As has already been said, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose was someone with a scientific temper. Sumantra has mentioned that. And there is an absolutely fascinating interview of him with the great scientist Meghnad Shah in 1938, which was held under the auspices of the Indian Science News Association. And that has been published in volume 9 of his collected works. And this 23rd January, we'll be bringing out a new edition of that volume with a new introduction. So before I thank and honor Professor Natarajan at the close of this evening, I would like to invite all of you who may belong to the Calcutta Management Association or the Alumni Association of IIM Kolkata and other guests, that you're only invited to our next events. On the 16th of January in the evening at 6 o'clock, we have the Shishir Kumar Bose lecture by Professor Pranab Bodhan of the University of California at Berkeley on reflections on the rightward shift in global politics, and being delivered 4 days before Trump begins his second term. This could not be more topical. And then, of course, on the 23rd of January, at 10:30 in the morning, we will have the traditional Netaji birthday assembly, to which you are also all very warmly invited. I would like to thank and honor Professor Natarajan with a gift of books. We are presenting to him a classic, Netaji, a pictorial biography, edited by Shishir Kumar Bose, which first came out in 1979. And we are also giving him a book authored by our mother, Krishna Bose, Netaji, Subhash Chandra Bose's life, politics, and struggle. Some of the essays here, there are 18 of them together. 4 were written by in English. The remainder have been translated by Sumantra from Bangla to English recently, in fact, posthumous. And so I hope that these books will help you carry back to the United States very happy memories of your visit to this historic house. Jatin.
Fine. Yes, sir. It has been a great image to be spending here. We company with August scholars here, and they're very interesting interaction, and I hope it stimulated some thoughts and discussion. Whatever, and it's still a very intriguing topic, and we're continuing to explore this in the future. I once again thank all of you, especially the organizers, GM, Professor Bose, for allowing me this opportunity. We did very glad, I would say, to be strategy here, and then against that tradition, especially when you mention other people like Professor Pranab Natarajan and others who are going to be doing several things in near future. So it's really my coverage, and I really enjoyed this, and very thankful to all of you, especially GM and Bassett. And thank you very much. Yeah. Darton Kings for parking the text. Actually,